Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. We're about to really get into the history of Oman today.
Yeah, thousands of years. It's quite a story.
It really is. You handed us this amazing stack of sources, articles, notes, all sorts.
Mhm.
And our job really is to dive into that, unpack it all for you, pull out the key insights, the surprising bits.
The shortcuts, basically.
Exactly, the shortcuts to understanding Oman's incredible journey. It's a place that's transformed so much.
And the roots go deep,
Right.
really deep. I mean, we're talking possibly 5,000 years of continuous settlement that we can actually study today.
Wow.
Yeah, potentially one of the oldest. And right from the start, one thing put it on the map: frankincense.
Ah, yes, that amazing resin. And fast forward a bit, by the 19th century, Oman wasn't just, well, Oman.
No, its reach was huge. Zanzibar, parts of East Africa,
Yeah.
plus the mainland, of course.
Muscat, the capital, was just vital, right on that key sea route, Europe to India.
Absolutely critical. But what's interesting looking at the sources is that despite that location, that reach,
Yeah.
historically outside the peninsula itself, it wasn't seen as like a prime target for conquest, not like
No.
Egypt or India. Yeah,
So less attractive for just straightforward exploitation.
kind of. The sources suggest its value was maybe more about controlling the route, controlling access past it.
Which makes sense when you look at the geography, that southeastern corner of the Arabian Peninsula.
Exactly. It's a pretty big country, area-wise,
Yeah.
around the size of Italy.
Borders with the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Yemen. But the coastline, that's the thing, over 3,100 kilometers.
Huge. Arabian Sea, Gulf of Oman, even a bit of the Arabian Gulf. That's shaped everything.
We'll definitely get into that maritime power aspect. And beyond Muscat, you've got Salah down south, Sohar, Sirnizwa, the old interior capital.
Right. And population-wise, around 2015, maybe 4.5 million people. But here's a striking number from the sources.
What's that?
Almost half, 45% expatriates.
Wow, nearly half. And that's not just a recent thing, is it? It ties into that history as a trade hub.
Completely. The sources show a lot from South Asia, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, working across all sorts of sectors: oil, construction, services.
And they're really part of the modern fabric, not just temporary workers.
Yeah, it reflects that multicultural aspect. And the land itself is so varied, too. You've got the Hajar Mountains, rugged.
Highest point over 2,000 meters.
Right. Then the massive dunes of the Rub al Khali spilling over coastal plains, and those famous green valleys, the wadis.
Wadi Bani Khalid, Wadi Shab, beautiful spots.
So let's wind the clock back even further. Ancient origins. The sources mention evidence, like way back, maybe 200,000 years ago in Dahir. Stone tools indicating presence.
Stone Age. But
Yeah.
then things get more settled, right? Clay brick settlements, Bronze Age burials.
Yeah, finds all over El Brahimi, Dhofar, Al-Ajar. And you see the beginnings of impressive building, too. Old castles, forts. Bala Fort is amazing.
Walled sites, stone buildings, even early domed structures mentioned, like Al-Qatra.
And stepping into the pre-Islamic era, say 7th millennium BC onwards, the sources talk about large Neolithic settlements, especially in the interior.
Yeah.
Places like Al Ain.
So they weren't just hunter-gatherers anymore. Agriculture, animals.
Exactly. Domesticating animals, making pottery, figurines. And then towards the end of the 4th millennium BC, a huge development. Copper.
Copper. The Omani mines were rich, weren't they?
Incredibly rich. And this wasn't just local. It sparked major trade. The material you gave us shows links all the way to Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley.
You can even see it in shared tomb styles, right?
That's the evidence, yeah.
Yeah.
But like we said before, you can't talk ancient Oman without frankincense.
Still blows my mind that this trade was global before pyramids, before common pottery even.
It's incredible scale, isn't it? That Boswellia sacred-tree in Dhofar. Initially, the copper trade used land routes over the mountains, but then camels. Late 2nd millennium BC.
The ship of the desert arrives, changes everything.
Totally. Suddenly, the desert interior becomes a highway. Goods from Yemen gold, silver timber, dyes from India, all flowing through.
And you get distinct towns emerging. Fortified, specific architecture.
Whitewashed mosques, those carved doors. You see a real urban culture developing.
But then there's a downturn. Late 7th century BC.
Seems so. Sources aren't totally clear on why. Maybe internal conflict, maybe rulers messing with agriculture.
Yeah.
But yeah, a period of decline before the next big shift.
Which was Islam. 7th century AD. A massive transformation for all of Arabia.
Fundamentally reshaped everything. Monotheism replacing polytheism, new political structures, military organization.
And it spread fast. The sources give the background on the Prophet Muhammad's life birth around 570, the revelation starting around 610, preaching, the move to Medina in 622.
The formation of the early Muslim community, the Ummah, the recording of the Quran, all laid out there.
So how did Orma fit into this initially? The Az tribe was dominant.
Yeah, controlled most of the area. Early evangelists weren't successful,
Right.
apparently. But then an expedition in 630, led by Abi al-Hadrami, conquest of Kalhak, then more, eventually a truce.
And that seems to have brought Oman into the fold more peacefully after that initial conflict.
For a time, yeah. The sources suggest a period of peace and prosperity under the early caliphate. But full integration took longer, well into the next century.
And the sources highlight something key here. Omanis accepted Islam, but held on to certain tenets, particularly about leadership.
Exactly. The principle of Imam. Who should lead the community after the prophet? This is where Oman's path diverges a bit.
Right. This is tied into the bigger Sunni-Shia split that happened over succession.
Precisely. And Oman's path led to the Ibadi branch. The sources explain it emerged from those early succession disputes. And uniquely, unlike Sunni and Shia Islam, Ibadis don't really have major internal divisions.
And it gained real strength in Oman, didn't it? Encouraged by opponents of the Umayyads.
Yeah, it spread. But Oman became its stronghold, still is today, along with pockets in Zanzibar and Libya.
What's the Omani school of Ibadism like, according to the sources?
Described as both orthodox and tolerant. Accepts diverse legal views, liberal toward other sects. Key difference. They don't see the prophet's statements as infallible in quite the same way. Less rigid, maybe.
And not focused on excommunicating opponents.
Seems not. And crucially, the sources mention their tradition of electing spiritual leaders, keeping religious and political power distinct.
That's huge. And the sources connect this directly to modern Oman, saying the elite often comes from the Ibadi heartland, Nizwa, making being Omani almost synonymous with being Ibadi.
That's a powerful statement in the material, yeah. Needs Ibadi scholarships, debates. They deeply influence culture, literature, everything.
Although there was a shift, the ruling class wasn't always fully embracing it.
Right. The sources mention some ambivalence until later in the 20th century. Especially after the 1970 coup, there was a broader embrace, but still with caution about, fundamentalism.
Okay, let's shift back to the sea. That maritime heritage you mentioned, Oman's seafaring history is incredibly long.
Predates most other Gulf settlements. That coastline and location made it perfect for trade links, India, Mesopotamia, Persia, East Africa.
And the fate of towns and cities rose and fell with that trade, didn't it? And with foreign powers meddling.
Constantly. Powers wanting to control the roads, protect their interests. Lots of ports sprang up. Some are gone now. Others became big cities like Sur, Muscat, Dhofar. These main ports were prizes.
Attracting attention from Sasanian Persia, Portugal, Britain, even independent India later on.
Yeah, all wanting to police routes, stop local power growing, or just dominate the trade themselves.
And the legacy of all this is?
An exceptional heritage. Archaeology, architecture, manuscripts. The sources stress this. Some of the oldest written records of Oman come from this interaction.
Speaking of foreign powers, Portugal. Arriving around 1507, sources mention an Omani attempt to kick them out of Muscat failed.
Initially, yes. The Portuguese took Hormuz too, a vital point. Persia tried to get it back later.
But then comes a major Omani resurgence in the mid-18th century.
Absolutely. The rise of the Al Said dynasty starts in 1744. Ahmed bin Said is elected imam after fighting off a Persian invasion of Muscat.
And that's the dynasty still ruling today. Amazing continuity.
It is. And some descendants held both roles, sultan and imam. Said bin Sultan is a key figure mentioned. Ruled 1804-1856.
He's the one who moved the capital all the way to Zanzibar.
That's him. Expanded the empire to its largest extent. He was Sultan of Oman and Zanzibar.
But the sources also say his efforts, plus European imperialism, ultimately led to the decline of Oman and the Swahili coast as major powers.
Yeah, it was a complex period. The peak, but also the seeds of decline were sown then, facing rising European power.
And during this time, Oman's doing this diplomatic dance, especially with the U.S. and Britain, trying to use the U.S. to balance the British.
Seems like it. That 1833 treaty with the U.S. aimed to boost trade. Didn't quite work out as hoped initially. Relations cooled a bit.
Then another treaty in 1853 improved things again.
Right, and the sources credit an American trader, Captain Edmund Roberts, for initiating contact back in 1828 in Zanzibar. He saw the potential.
Hoping for treatment like the British rivals got. The first Omani envoy went to the U.S. in 1856.
But Britain was the dominant power. That Anglo-Omani Treaty of 1862. The sources really highlight this. It forced Oman into a much closer relationship, imposed military duties.
And created that problematic northern border, the Al-Dahira boundary.
Yeah, decided by the British. Became a source of constant friction, impacting Dhofar, the Yemen border. Just ongoing trouble.
So this treaty set up a special relationship that lasted a long time, until the 1960s.
Pretty much. The sources also mention specific British actions, like annexing Doha in 1916, a failed expedition from India, raising concerns about British prestige and German influence.
But U.S.-Oman relations picked up again after WWII.
Yes, as U.S. interests in the Middle East grew generally.
Okay, World War II itself. How did Oman figure? Still seen as strategic.
Definitely. For those eastern trade routes, by then it was firmly in the British sphere after they took Aden in 1839. The Sultan had to recognize British dominance, channel trade their way.
But as British power maybe seemed less absolute, the Sultanate looked for opportunities, trying to occupy Kishim, disrupting Persian trade.
Yeah, testing the waters. And other powers were interested too, Germany, Japan, Italy, all looking to loosen Britain's grip on the Indian Ocean.
The sources mentioned the British leaving a port in southern Yemen in 1939, Mukalla Darai, and Japan using it.
Right. That shifted shipping patterns made Aden less central. Britain was worried about attacks, submarines, looking for alternative routes, maybe hinting at future U.S. involvement via Arabian coast stations.
Okay, now the big pivot, the 1970 coup. The sources paint a stark picture of Oman before then under Sultan Qaboos bin Said.
Extremely isolated. Backwards is the word used often. Virtually no schools, hospitals, electricity in 1940. Phones came very late.
Illiteracy over 90%, no infrastructure, undeveloped economy.
Plus that simmering civil war in Dhofar, encouraged by South Yemen. And oil money was tiny then, less than $50 million pre-1970.
So, a really difficult situation.
Ripe for change.
Yeah.
And change came dramatically in 1970. Sultan Qaboos bin Said bin Taimur overthrows his father. That's the birth date of modern Oman.
And Qaboos ruled for a long time, consistently, educated, traveled, a total contrast to his father.
Completely. The shift was immediate. From isolation to openness, accessibility.
And the improvements listed in the sources are just staggering. Women's issues, urban development, education, healthcare, jobs, infrastructure.
It's described as lifting people out of decades of, well, obscurantism and insecurity is one phrase used.
You can literally see it, can't you? Muscat transformed, waterfront parks where there were none, new centers, but keeping the old forts, too.
That blend is important. And of course, the oil money exploding after late 74 funded a lot of this rapid development.
Yeah.
Demolishing old, building new, bringing Bedouins into towns.
Sultan Qaboos even apologized for past issues, like military actions.
Yes, and pushed education, especially in the interior. He really shaped the country until his death in 2020.
Let's quickly revisit that Dhofar rebellion. Started 64. A real threat to the old sultan.
Driven by youth dissent, resentment at the palace, that political vacuum from the isolationism.
Gained momentum, accepted help from the People's Liberation Army.
Became quite organized. International notice, attacks near Muscat, hitting oil facilities in 66.
And they set up their own administration in Dhofar after pushing the sultan's forces back.
Yeah, the Dhofar Popular Liberation Front. Had a whole program, foreign policy, security, socialist aims.
Contrasted with Sultan Qaboos just defending the coast, bombing the interior, losing touch completely.
Described as Middle Ages tactics in the sources, the discontent just built and built, leading to the 70 coup by Qaboos, who, the sources suggest, felt patronized himself by the foreign presence, maybe understanding the rebels' feelings.
And Qaboos's response was smart, wasn't it? Not just military victory.
Crucially, no. He saw peace immediately, negotiated an internal treaty, offered amnesty, rebuilt forts, got loans for development, laid the foundation that kept him secure.
So bring us to the 21st century. The Oman in the sources is modern, integrated globally. Older ways are more museum pieces now.
Yeah, quite a contrast to those early 20th century reports of basic huts. Development has raised living standards dramatically, thanks to government, people, oil.
Still strategically vital at the Gulf's mouth. Multi-ethnic population, Muslims, Hindus, Christians, expats. Arabic is official, but Hindi Urdu widely heard.
And even family life has changed. More travel abroad for medical reasons, social, economic.
But development brings challenges. Environmental ones are big in the sources. Land use changes.
Urban sprawl, basically. Built-up increase, replacing desert and scrubland. Oman recognizes the risks, climate change, pollution, high water demand is a huge issue.
Needs a unified environmental approach, the sources say.
Definitely. And urbanization brings crowding, potential inequities, even with investment. Research is looking at how to manage growth better.
But positives too. Better water management, preserving ancient systems like qanats.
Yeah, modern landfills, water supply, preserving the qanats is key. better drainage, reducing floods. Progress is being made.
What about other 21st century issues? Education's a focus.
Huge focus. More universities, colleges. Some minor student issues led to changes in administration, scholarship discussions.
And jobs for young people. Still a challenge.
A persistent one, yes. Government prioritizes Omanis, set up councils,
Yeah.
but it's tough. Then the oil price drop around 2009, hit revenues hard.
Budget cuts, halted projects, and this led to protests, peaceful ones.
Yeah, after Tunisia, demanding better wages, lower prices, Sultan Qaboos responded directly, visited protesters, created over 50,000 government jobs.
And Oman uses its sovereign fund for international investments, too.
Right. Now, foreign relations under Qaboos. That strategy of openness really defined it, replacing isolation.
And that famous neutrality and independence, refusing to join some Arab groups, the GCC initially.
Exactly. Specific examples stand out. Freezing that loan to Iraq, keeping ties with Iran post-revolution, staying neutral in the Iran-Iraq war, not hosting fleeing Baathists.
And this neutrality continues. Good ties with the U.S., Europe, avoiding embargoes.
That's the picture from the sources, yes. And a really key role they played was mediating with Iran on the nuclear program.
Sultan Qaboos talking directly with Khamenei, Ahmadinejad visiting Muscat, acting as a quiet go-between.
A significant diplomatic role. Now, looking forward, there's this big push towards tourism.
Because the oil won't last forever, Ministry of Tourism is really promoting Oman.
And it's about reframing the image, isn't it? From remote backwater to showcasing history, landscapes. Even the mountains and deserts once used for defense are now attractions.
The goal being
Attract revenue by presenting Oman positively achievement, prestige rather than isolation or hardship, maybe focusing more on the good history in tourist spots.
which ties into how cultural heritage is seen as something constructed, changing.
Exactly. A socio-political construct, reflecting identity, conflict, trade. Oman's crossroads history is evident in its forts, tombs, art.
Let's dig into education again briefly. Vision 2040 focuses on quality in higher education.
Yeah, quality assurance laws, international centers. Private universities are maturing too.
The goal is upgrading existing places, not just building new ones.
Right, bringing them to world-class standards. Needs international expertise. Future research might look at rankings, how private unis help non-oil employment.
Even exporting education, collaborations.
Ideas being explored, yeah. Hope for degree recognition too?
And women's roles. Sources say major progress, legal, social, economic rights, active participation.
Definitely. Educated women in many fields. Diplomacy, engineering, law. Statistics show high participation in skilled jobs compared to neighbors and the private sector.
But challenges remain. Uneven change.
Yes. Lower wages, inequality in Muscat, custodial laws favoring men impacting family decisions. Traditional gender roles are still strong.
Endorsed by men and women, limiting choices, stressing family values where men often decide.
That's what the sources suggest. But women are persistent, pursuing ambitions. Their influence might grow. They keep pushing for political opportunities too, despite underrepresentation. Presence is increasing.
So, wrapping up, Oman's story from these sources is one of deep contrasts, tradition and rapid modernization side by side.
Muscat embodies it. Ancient stone, modern buildings, a historical stronghold, but also developing fast.
And that incredible architecture across the country, the forts, World Heritage sites.
Speaks to that long history. But development brings pressure. Urban sprawl, environmental impacts. Needs sustainable solutions.
So it's a nation with deep roots, going through intense state-led modernization, navigating social change, economic shifts away from oil, all while holding on to its identity and neutrality.
It's a fascinating balancing act.
It really is. And it leaves us, and you, the listener, with this thought. In a world changing so fast, how does a nation like Oman, with such ancient foundations, manage this constant tension, preserving tradition while embracing modernity? Balancing that unique identity against 21st century pressures, something to really think about. Thanks for diving deep with us into Oman's history, using the sources you provided.
Absolutely. It's a rich, complex story and well worth exploring further.